want to know, have you ever looked successful while feeling completely depleted inside?
I believed I was successful. My business numbers would have said that I was successful, right? So if I take that to work, but at home, as an example, my weight had ballooned and I was feeling very ashamed of self. My marriage wasn't as good as it could be, right? It was a rocky year during that time. Like I can remember all those things where people looking at me thought, oh, there's Jen, the CEO. She's got it together. But that's why for me, this is about where we live, work, pray, and play. This isn't just success by the business numbers. And is it worth having a successful business if I lose my marriage, or if my teenage children don't want to talk to me, or if I feel ashamed of myself?
Welcome to the FitZen Project. The world teaches you to hustle harder. And I'm here to help you stop outsourcing yourself and start leading from within. I'm Rachel Fitzpatrick. And around here, alignment is the new hustle, because you are your most important project. Hey guys, so we have made stress evidence of success, okay? Like the more busy you are, the more important you are. The more exhausted you are, the more productive you are. And if you have a full calendar, you must be doing life right. Trust me. That's what I basically signed up for, that nonsense too. Okay, just throw that right out in your lap. But let me just tell you, I got to sit here with Jen Stanford, and she put a whole new spin on it. And she wrote this book called De-Stressed, and it challenges the entire idea, all right? And she also proclaims, like, your energy is your greatest currency. And I don't disagree at all. And we get into this really cool concept that there's healthy stress and then there's misalignment. And this is exactly why I'm in love with this new concept. Not really new concept, but new to us. Alignment is the new hustle. And success and peace, they're not opposites, and they don't have to compete with each other, all right? So maybe that self-leadership aspect of it all isn't learning how to carry more. It's literally being so aware that you know when to set something down. So Jen Stanford, the author of De-Stressed, and I absolutely love where this conversation went, and I know you will too. Hello, Jennifer. Welcome to the FitZen Project.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
I am too. I know your book is called De-Stress, and I'm just going to go right out of the gate. And this podcast is built on the idea that alignment is the new hustle. So I feel like those two are actually saying the same thing, but in different directions. So that's where I really want to start, just like get right into the grit of it. What does that de-stress life actually look like?
I love that you have that new alignment piece, because that's one of the reasons that I talk about that what gets in the way, right, of us having that level of peace. And, I feel like I'm on this just mission to debunk this theory that we have to be super busy, super stressed. We're stressed like, I say like a badge of honor, right? If I say I'm super busy, if people could see that I'm stressed, right? It's almost like this external validation that's been going on, and not being aligned to our purpose and some of the things that we care about is a big reason behind it. But I think that we could easily have a conversation where these align perfectly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I just got into this like whole idea. Well, maybe not even an idea, but maybe a lifestyle of this is actually what I'm doing, and having to put that label on alignment being the new hustle, where I was living in a way before that where being stressed was the hustle, and
Mhm.
being exhausted was like the status symbol to life, pretty much. And that's how you kind of measure success, is like, well, how tired are you at the end of the day?
Yeah, and it's so funny when I was growing up, there was this saying, and not hip enough to know if it's still a thing with the young people like you, but when we were growing up, especially young in my marriage and in my career, it was felt like keeping up with the Joneses, right? And so everything was about like keeping up with everything and everybody and, having that same lifestyle and, with this whole inception, Facebook for me was first, but all the social media, it was, can I project this image that I am the best at everything, or that was me. I'm, the best mom, the best CEO, the best volunteer at church, the community servant, the best neighbor. I mean, you name it, I was determined to be the best. And I think, I've said this honestly before, and it's not a rub, but I think part of it is, I kind of grew up in like government program management, and that tended to be more of a male dominated industry, at least when I started. And so I think this whole idea that I see a lot with women, not necessarily just with women, but I do see it with a lot of women, which is we have to go above and beyond to prove ourselves because we have maybe a little bit of imposter syndrome, or we have just this proof, even to ourselves and to those around us, that we can compete at that level and that we belong in those tables and in those rooms. And so it feels like the only way to do that is to be the best at everything. But in spite of what, like at the end of the day, who's really going to remember? We're going to remember, the people we love are going to remember, but not the people sitting around that boardroom. They're not going to remember us.
Right. Right. And that takes like so much more energy away from everything else that you've also got going on. You
Mhm.
know, I think I wrote in my email, I'm like a mom. I work full time. I do this podcast. I teach yoga. I just got married. I'm having the family and all of the things in between. And it's just like, and all of that says that I'm got a lot going on. And the women, I feel like my mom raised me to be this independent person, but she was also based on survival too. So, how do you go from being productive to addicted to urgency? Like, where do you break
Wow,
that?
that's a great point to think of because I think there's always going to be seasons. I don't think it's fair just to tell somebody, well, drop something, right? You don't need to do all because there's seasons when we do have to work all day. We have to get home. Our child has signed up for practice. We want to allow them to have a fulfilled life, right? We feel maybe strongly about sitting down at the dinner table as a family and cooking ourselves. Everybody's value system comes into play differently. And to me, there's no good, bad, right or wrong. There's only different, right? And so we have to one, not judge each other for our own urgency. I, for one, am big on, like, I keep an Eisenhower matrix every week, so that I can track looking at my calendar, what is a priority? What really is urgent, right? And what's important? And am I thinking it's important? That's like a little question that I put on there, like, is this really important or do you just want it to be important? And that's a interesting question to ask yourself because I have found for me that I have a very action oriented personality. Therefore, the idea of hustle is appealing, right? And so the idea of grinding can be appealing. And I actually I had to learn how to prioritize because if everything is urgent and important, nothing is urgent and important, right? We've heard that. And I think everybody has to be able to evaluate for themselves, but asking the question, I've put I wrote about this in the book, but I've put my teams through unnecessary stress and chaos for an assumed sense of urgency from a client that wasn't even really there. When I went back and asked, it wasn't there, but I put my own self-imposed sense of urgency. So I think we have to learn how to separate, is something self-imposed versus have we really been given this demand or this milestone? And that's what we're working toward, at least in the business world, even at home, right? Learning how to do that can solve a lot of expectations being out of alignment, which is a huge source of grief.
Oh gosh, fulfill. That's a whole book.
Yeah, it is. I would agree. I would agree. It's definitely another long podcast conversation.
My gosh. I mean, I just was telling my husband the other day, I was like, I'm a project executive. I write project plans and I put into play implementations all strategic all the time, right? And I make up the dates. Like I am the date maker upper. Like, I'm the reason we all stress out all the time because I'm like, of course we can do it, you know? Just like with him, I'm like, yeah, you can mow the yard and paint the front door all in one Saturday's work. It's not a big deal. And he's like, there's a lot that goes into painting the front door and making sure that the yard is mowed. Like, it's more than just 2 hours. I'm like, no, it's not. You can get it
It
done.
should be. It should be, 2 hours. But it's funny though, the things often, that, using husbands as a great example of expectations that we have that sometimes we don't even communicate. We don't even verbalize, and then we're disappointed when they're not met because we thought the door should be painted in 2 hours and then we should be heading to dinner, or, doing something else. And why is it taking, 2 days? And I think just like a good project manager would do, right? We have to ask the people doing the work how long a duration should be,
Right.
before we just assign it. Otherwise, we're going to end up in this sense of chaos, right? And so I think that's really that underlying theme for how do you determine that difference with the urgency is, do you really know what it takes to do that element of work, whatever, wherever it is, and have you verified it with the right authority?
Yeah. Yeah. Or otherwise, you end up in a ball of stress and the sleepless nights and everything else in between. Ah, so how do you land in that with when you're talking about stress, you feel that in your body. How does that show up? And do you see it and you automatically know that that's what you're seeing, or does it take a minute to like you have to feel it and then you know, wait, I've got to take a minute and backtrack a bit.
Think, there's some what I believe are quick indicators, right, that we can do. If you wake up, for an example, and you have a headache, right, it could be that you were clenching your jaw. I'm a jaw clencher, right? And so sometimes if I wake up with a headache, I went to bed with some tension. I'm tense in the night, right? So I might wake up with a headache, or maybe my neck is stiff. I think, having had plenty of rest and waking up and still feeling that level of exhaustion, I think the challenge comes, we might recognize some of these signs, right? We might recognize them, but we ignore them because we think, oh, I'll catch up on my rest. I'll take care of it at the end of the week, right? Or once I get through this project, or once I do this, then. So this big if, once, and then syndrome, I call it, is you're always then going to be living in the gap because you're never going to get to that place. Or we're then using our vacation time as our place to recoup from exhaustion. And I just feel like there's so many better ways that we could spend our vacation, right? And so if we can learn to manage this and be aware of the signs, we may be grabbing extra caffeine during the day than we normally would. Again, linked maybe because we didn't get enough rest, right? Or we're avoiding going to see, for me, it's a chiropractor. If my neck's out of alignment, I know I probably need, to go to the chiropractor and get adjusted. If I keep putting it off, it's not going to get any better, right? And so some of those things, you could feel in your shoulders right here, right? A lot of people carry tension in this area. So kind of pushing down on our traps, if that feels really tight, we're like, oh, wow, I feel, a couple knots there. That's probably tension and stress, like holding up there. And, the other easy one that I tell people is, do you have an upset stomach? Because upset stomachs, so much of our stress is originating in the gut. And so if we're having that, upset stomach, it could be because we're also dealing with some stress, especially if it's, over a period of time. So I think those are some quick indicators. I think, again, the unfortunate thing can be, are we just ignoring them, or are we using it as data like we would anything else? I think when we learn to make it about data instead of a weakness or a feeling, then we can process it as data and then choose to do something about it. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
yeah, absolutely. I just wonder, like, why are we so good at ignoring these signs and symptoms, like these signals in our bodies? Is it to just appease, or is it the people pleasing? Is it the, like, I've got to make this happen or else type? Is it fear?
Well, I mean, I think fear and ego come into everything, right? You had a recent podcast where you were talking about, kind of the ego that can sneak in, right? When we're thinking about these different evaluations that we're doing in our life. And I think it's usually ego or fear what drive our behaviors, right? And so it could be ego to the sense of I'm fine, I've got this, right? There's gonna be time. I got this. That was kind of me, I got this. And then there's fear. Wow, what if they see that I don't got this?
Yeah,
And, or if I take time, and am I then going to be behind the curve or, in a setback? And, I know for me and my own health, I let things kept getting bad. And I got to the point where, I mean, I was sick and out for a month. That was completely avoidable and unacceptable. And, you can't run a business when you're sitting in bed and you can't really breathe. And so there's not a better time than now. And I think when we learn to accept the information our body's giving us as data, like just like we would any other type of data coming to us, and make small shifts, then we have the opportunity to get it under control so that we're not having to wait until something happens to take care of ourselves. And I think if we accept this notion that I've said that your energy is your greatest currency, if we really believe that the way that we show up sets the tone for the teams that we work with, the people that we love, if we believe that, then we should wholeheartedly want to do what we can to ensure that our energy is indeed in the best possible place that it can be.
yeah. I want to be like Snabs.
I love some snaps.
Absolutely. And I think that falls back into what you said when we first started this conversation too, was you end up in that imposter syndrome, or you're trying to be the woman in a male dominated environment. And it's easy to ignore those um, signs and symptoms, like your gut or your shoulders and these racing thoughts at night, because you do want to make sure you're not dropping the ball or letting them down or showing out that I've got this. When what we do on our team, when that happens, it's always within our internal side, where someone is running with it and they're trying to find an answer, and they keep getting to a dead end or a dead end or a dead end. It's taking time, when all the most simplest thing they could have ever done from the first dead end was, hey, I need help. Can I get an extra set of
Yes.
eyes? And nobody's going to fire you for that. Like, nobody is going to be like chastising you for saying, hey, I might be looking at this incorrectly. I'd love another perspective, you know, for
So
like,
since you're talking about your team, so then how do you get that message across to your team so that they know that that psychological safety is what I would call that, right? That exists and that they should feel willing to raise their hand and ask for help.
yeah, I always am available to offer help. I'm like, just add me as what I say, a user. So we have a platform that we integrate into hospital systems. And I'm like, just add me as a user, and I watch the trainings. I've been trained on this stuff for every single client that goes through. I'm trained on it, but I'm not an expert in it. So, however, if they need an extra set of eyes or anything, I'm like coming in from a different perspective, someone that's not a subject matter expert perspective. And maybe that's all you need as a shift to think about something or a process to improve differently.
Hmm.
Because you could be so deep into the data and you're a genius in it and you're an expert in it. But eventually you'll need someone who's not that deep to provide an open perspective to be able to assist in a new process or way forward.
I like that. I like that. I think that makes such a difference when the team isn't sure. And again, I think that comes back to so many times we think we've created that environment, right?
Yeah.
We you can't just feel it. Of course, you should know that, right? I think and that need to really pulse and check in with people on the level of stress or pressure they're feeling or hesitation is often something I'm finding in organizations that we're not really tracking. We track engagement, right? We're tracking, the metrics of when we're getting things done, but we're not necessarily tracking how stressed you feel because we believe it's so arbitrary. But I do think that there's a way to say to people, hey, when we check in each week, I just do smiley face, sad face. Tell me where you are with your stress. Smiley face, sad face. You could do a slash if it's somewhere in the middle, because I want to understand where people are before I start laying out what we're going to do for the week, because it's going to make a difference on how it's received and how it's executed.
That's a brilliant idea and a brilliant way to conduct your week. And starting it out, I mean, to allow your associates to feel seen and heard and actually reciprocate that back to them as a mirror before adding anything on, that's a big deal.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I think that's probably why you've cultivated a culture retention, you
Sure. I
know?
mean, I agree. I
Oh,
think it definitely can.
so when we're looking at this, I know I teach yoga, for example. I'm going to use a yoga example, then we'll see how we can correlate that back. But I'm learning, I'm getting my 500 hour right now, and I'm learning that I was teaching in a way to always protect, protect, protect. Don't lock out the joints. You don't want to hurt yourself. You don't want to stack it up and everything else. But then now the new studies have come out to where your body actually does need a little bit of stress to be able to build some stamina
Sure.
against when
Hmm.
it's actually stressed against its will, but you want to be able to build that up. So, for example, locking out elbows or locking out knee joints in different poses. So now I'm teaching to that, but in a safer way. So, how can you, as a leader in a business industry, evaluate what is healthy stress and what's self-betrayal stress?
Sure. I think that's a great point. And I love that analogy because I think we have to be willing to be uncomfortable in order to grow. I
Mhm.
think that's a fact of life, whether it's physical, emotional, intellectual, purposeful, spiritual, all of those things. We have to be willing to put ourselves into uncomfortable situations for growth.
Yeah.
And I can see that, you're saying yoga poses, and I can see that some of those are going to be more uncomfortable, than others. And in the leadership world, I think we have to think about that the same way. Am I pushing myself? And don't get me wrong, I'm a big believer that pressure is good. Pressure is good for us. It's a good motivator. It can excite teams. It challenges teams. It helps us be more innovative. It is a great driver. That's eustress, EUSTRESS, right? When we push that for too long, right, or it increases past our capacity, then we move into not de-stress like the book, but distress, right? DISTRESS. And that is where we shift from this good stress to bad stress. And that's where I believe energy becomes so important, because the better that we're keeping up with our energy, right? And all of the energy buckets that I talk about in the book, the better equipped that we are to be resilient, to push ourselves into those uncomfortable states so that we can continue to grow. But again, like so many things, it has a limit. And we have to know as an individual contributor, what is my true limit? I'm willing to be uncomfortable on this team. I'm going to go ahead and get pushed. When do I need to raise my hand? Right? Rachel said, raise your hand. When do I get to raise my hand? And then as the leader, I need to know collectively, what is my team capable of? How far do I push my team? Because we don't want to always push the same two individuals that seem like they have a little bit more stamina. We really have to look at that team dynamic. And that really takes a leader being present, showing up with their own energy. And just because I'm the leader and I'm preaching energy, doesn't mean every day my energy is going to be fantastic. I'm going to need to pull from people on the team. sometimes, right? If my energy is low. And so it's that collective energy that allows us to really say, now we're a high performing team, not just a high performing couple of individuals that are carrying the team. I think that's a distinct difference worth mentioning.
That's huge. I think Brene Brown mentions this in one of her books, just in relationships, and I feel like I can apply this across the board. Is she said she'd come home to her husband and she's like, "Look, I'm at 30% today. I need you to be 70 so they could be 100 together," or vice versa. Or maybe he's at 30% too and she's at 30%, but that 60 means 100 for them.
Sure.
So
Yep.
when I read that, it clicked because it's not always about getting to 100. It's just about knowing your capacity for the day and the present moment, and then what is in everyone else's, and that's that for the day. Like,
Hmm.
that's that.
I love that you're saying the day because energy is consumable, right? But we use it that day. But depending on the baseline we've set, there's also a renewable aspect to it when it comes to our bodies. And so I wake up and I tell people every day there's only two things that we can control: our attitude and our effort. And each day we get to start over. And so we bring the best energy we can that day. Wow, how awesome. We get to choose what time we go to bed. Hopefully, right? We get to choose what we're putting in our body for the most part. We get to choose how active we're going to be in the next day. We get to choose how we're going to show up in spite of all of that. And so I think that's a very powerful position to be in where we have allowed too much of our external circumstances, tentacles, whatever it may be, to impact and decide how we're going to show up. No, we get to decide how we're going to show up. And that puts us in a position, I believe, of more power over our energy. And I think that becomes a game changer when we're working with teams and all of our relationships, but particularly when we're working with energy that's going to build off one another.
Yeah. And it is a building block for sure. And what I love about the it's not even like a mantra or a saying, but it is like a necessity of life. You have to get some good sleep to be able to function the next day. And that's a thing. But it's not just let's rest the body. But when you're sleeping, you're alchemizing a lot of that bad, negative, whatever thing that happened in that day. And you're alchemizing it so that you can then wake up fresh the next day and have a whole new perspective. I'm, I'm a very intense dreamer for some odd reason. I got chosen for that in life. But if I wake up where I've had some intense dreams, it could set my whole day. And I'm like, dang, I really didn't want to feel this way today. And I will notice how it's felt in the first 10 minutes of me being awake. And it's just like, well, this is my day today. This
And
is
do you
how
have a trick for how you manage that feeling?
I have to become very self-aware that that is a dream state. And then I will journal, journal, journal until why is my subconscious thinking in this way? Why is this being showing up now? Like what has happened in the past 72, 48 hours for me to be thinking this when I've not got control of my thoughts? You
Sure.
know, that's what I do but my dreams are intense.
Well, and I
That,
think journaling is extremely important. I can remember, psychology class in high school, and we did, dream studies, and it was, you had the notepad by your bed, and we had to set an alarm and try to wake up and, document our dream to learn more about your dream. My little sister, she still to this day would wake up and be like, I had the craziest dream, and mine just seemed so, plain and simple. And my daughter has inherited that same thing from my sister. Mom, I had the craziest dream, and she's walking me through. I'm like, how is this even that we're in the same family, but it's remarkable to watch. But I think, you know, the the real lesson in that, I think, is, we wake up and you're keeping that sense of control through journaling. And there might be some days where we wake up and you know what, we might not have the time or the capacity to process the why. But we can go ahead and get it on paper. And then at the end of that, we can say, in spite of this, I'm going to choose to bring my best energy. I try to get people to just say that, recognize that that's a choice, right? Say a quick prayer or meditation, whatever that works for you, to say, hey, guide me, lead me. But then at the end of the day, you get to choose. And at the beginning of the day, you get to choose. And so making that conscious choice, I know when I started doing that and I started waking up and saying, instead of saying, oh, I have to go to work or I have to go to the gym, wow, I get to go to work today. I get to go to the gym. My body's dragging ass, right? But I get to go there, and I would get so excited about it, right? And so, you know, those are just minor shifts, but they're powerful. Words are powerful in our brain and in our psyche. And so when we can just make those conscious shifts, whether it's a sticky on the mirror, right? Or, if it's just saying it or writing it down, again, we're putting that power of choice back into our hands where we can.
Absolutely. And it is our decisions and these like tiny micro choices that we get, like 90,000 a day or something like that, that really are our drivers, like to the sleep, to the next day. But yeah, I love that you have become aware with that to be like, this is how I'm going to choose to look at my job, look at the fact that I get to work out, and it's a gift. It's just another day and a gift.
It
So,
is. I think that's so important. One of the things that, just kind of going back to your sleep thing, that made me just think that this is worth mentioning too is, yes, it's a choice. Yes, I get to wake up and say that. But if I'm waking up and saying that after 4 hours of sleep consecutively, and I know I'm waking up stressed and I'm just trying to like psych myself out, again, that's going to have a short runway. And so that whole thing about the body alchemizing and thinking about, that's our brain, that's also our gut, right? And so remembering the importance of sleep and thinking, wow, that's one small thing I can try to make a shift to do, right? New moms are going to struggle with that a little bit more. So where can we get, those 20-minute power naps in, or just other things to allow the body to recover, recognizing how much the body will recover itself if we get that environment created.
yeah, and it is creating that environment. And that's so important to be able to do that. I mean, I just read the Bhagavad Gita book, and it states in there, like, for meditation to have this practice, like, you want to be able to get still in a quiet environment, a cooled down environment, like not necessarily temperature, but like light, so you can go inward. But when you can go inward, you can rejuvenate more. And when you're rejuvenating, your body is doing its natural healing. I think that's real cool. I had no intention on bringing that up, but I was getting online
I
with
think
you
it's
today, but I'm like,
I think it's important. I agree with you. I agree with you.
yeah. So I do have a question. I want to turn it back to career wise. With regarding success, I just want to know, have you ever looked successful while feeling completely depleted inside?
Yes, 100%. Arms going up
Yeah.
for sure. In fact, when I really got to well, let me say this. I believed I was successful. My business numbers would have said that I was successful, right? So if I take that to work, but at home, as an example, my weight had ballooned and I was feeling very ashamed of self. My marriage wasn't as good as it could be, right? It was a rocky year during that time. Like, I can remember all those things where people looking at me thought, oh, there's Jen, the CEO. She's got it together. But that's why for me, this is about where we live, work, pray, and play. This isn't just success by the business numbers. And is it worth having a successful business if I lose my marriage, or if my teenage children don't want to talk to me, or if I feel ashamed of myself, and that I really, all I'm thinking about when I get on that next stage is, I don't like how I look, not here's a beautiful message I have to share with someone. And so I compartmentalized, like so many of us do, and I rode the wave of, but I'm successful here. I'm successful here. So all these things are okay. And I was unwilling, ego coming back in, right? to really sit with myself and evaluate all the areas of my life and give them a true score. Because I think part of me said, well, I'm successful here. You all should just accept that. Or, you know what? It makes sense. You know, my husband has just this horrible saying. He's a retired Army first sergeant, but he says, you know, excuses are like buttholes. We all have them, right? And they all stink. And I, maybe we can't play that on the podcast, but you know, it just makes you think like when you're in that state, if you want to justify things, you will, right? And we ride that for quite some time. I did for quite some time. And I had all the excuses in the book. Well, it's because I'm making money. It's because I'm doing this. And you have to get back to your why. We talked about this in the very beginning, but what do I really want out of life? What does a successful life look like? And I think we have to put our whole life, you know, on the evaluation docket and give it a true view if we really want to be successful. So I would say I looked successful, but I was not successful in all areas of my life. And I think had I had an evaluation form, if I did a 360 in all the areas of my life rather than just at work, I likely would have been surprised. But if everybody gave me real honest results.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Do you think stressed people actually lead well?
I think for a time they do. I think again it comes back to, are they still in that we're under pressure, right? And I still have it together. But here's some of the things that I noticed. Leaders will say, "Oh, I'm just stressed, but I'm still leading well." I have sat in meetings with leaders who say that, and I see the facial expression change. I see looking around the room a couple rolled eyes that came after something that was said. That's not leading well. That's
Mm,
thinking you're leading well, but not being completely present. And I think that's one of the toughest things about stress. Stress pulls us out of that present moment because we're too much up in our head or in our heart, right? And so when we're living there, we're not living here. And so we're really not aware. And so we've created like this own imagination of how things are going. And when, again, ego and fear is in there, we'd stop asking. We're not asking everybody, "Hey, am I stressing you out?" I think about it now. In fact, I even created in the book, and I have it on the website, different evaluations like a family could do as an example, not a score, just you know, let's talk through this questionnaire because I don't want families scoring themselves because it's not a comparison, but it's saying things like, "Hey, are our dinners stressful?" Right? Does mommy and daddy, you know, seem stressed to you? Like questions that you could honestly ask for feedback, because I think we'd be surprised by some of the answers. I can remember rushing kids to practices. I can remember the worst days of the week being going to church because we were going to be there on time. Everybody was going to look good. We were, you know, and a place that was supposed to be relaxation and grace became pressure and pushing and, you know, it was a place that was supposed to be better than I allowed it to be due to the environment that I was creating.
oof. Yes, I have chills right now just hearing
It's a
that.
hard lesson. I'm willing to be as honest as I can. Don't do all the things I do. Please, you have a chance to recover.
What is the energy you've noticed like in your corporate world? What's the energy you've noticed people follow? Is it like confidence, calm, or certainty?
I think what teams want is certainty, then calm, then confidence. That's what I'm starting to see because confidence without certainty is ego, and there's mixed messaging there for the team, right? Calm without certainty comes off as almost aloof, like maybe we don't care. And so the certainty piece, though, without calm can become stressful. And so, you know, it's an interesting combination between them. But from all of the research that I've done in organizations, what people really want is consistency and certainty. So they need to know how you're going to show up. So this, how's Jen going to show up today, cannot be part of the equation because now I have uncertainty, not just for the work, but for the behavior. And so again, how we show up can impact like 50% of the productivity of that day. 50%. So if we're showing up and we're giving messages and we're stressed out, we're now putting that on our teams who are spending half of their day wondering, what did they do wrong? Wonder what's up with Jen. I have no idea what she just said. I wrote it down, but I'm too afraid to go in there and ask for clarity. I'll just give this a shot, right? And now we're just in these horrible cycles that we don't need to be in. And so I do think that it's important. Yeah, sure, you want to be confident, but I'd rather be clear with you that I don't have the answer, and let's gain trust that way than the vice versa.
I 100% agree. 100%. And I feel like if you're certain without the calmness, you can create these red flags that are just unnecessary. And I feel when you were telling that scenario, I was kept thinking about like Christmases and Thanksgivings with my family. And there's always that one cannon, like that loose cannon family member that comes in and just blows it up. Or maybe they don't, but everybody else is always on eggshells around that one family member every time because they're so unstable, or, they're just not, I don't know, consistent
Yeah.
with,
And you don't know how they're going to show up. I think that's a great point. I
yeah,
also think that, the holidays are very stressful for people. And a lot of that is, again, that like expectation mismanagement, right? So even, oh, I want to have, the perfect meal, the perfect table setting. I don't want anybody drinking too much. I don't want anybody, arguing or, having a political conversation at the table, just all the things. And we get this angst for ourselves. And so, it's amazing. We actually, a couple years ago, we were just like, you know what? We had this conversation, my husband and I first, the kids too. He's like, he's the big chef of the family. And he said, this is how this Thanksgiving's going to go. We're going to have a lot of people, right? We're all going to pitch in. You guys are going to have this job. And he goes, and I'm not going to freak out. I'm making a choice right now. I'm not going to worry about everybody likes it. We're just going to go with the flow. It was the best holiday we ever had. And my parents were there. We had different people in and out, and it wasn't stressful at all. And it was because we made the choice ahead of time not to get there. And it was like a 5-minute conversation. And I think it's probably changed our holidays for the rest of our lives. And, I've been married 31 years, so maybe it took us a little while to get there, but it was still magical. And those are the memories that we still have. And so I say that because to me, it's never too late to again, make those choices and those pivots instead of just saying, well, that's just the way our family is, or that's how it's always been. Well, you know
right.
what? Again, we can make a choice and make it different this next one. And how exciting is that?
Yeah, you don't have to accept the way that it's always been. Choices can be made to differentiate. So, how much of that stress is from trying to control the outcome versus just trusting yourself that it's gonna work out?
Yeah. I'm a recovering controlaholic. I say that, I ended up getting myself an emotional coach and getting into therapy because I was like, I'm suffering from these expectations being, out of alignment. Why am I getting these? And, having someone to talk to for me was extremely beneficial. I still meet with her, once every few months to check in but I learned so much. This was, several years ago, but about why was I putting these pressures on? Why, and it takes some introspection, and it takes, some willingness to be honest and to, put some mirrors up that you might not like, what you're seeing. But what I learned was, again, I was putting so much pressure and stress on different elements of my life due to expectations that perhaps were unrealistic, or I say, contracts that nobody read that I had signed. And, but I expected everybody to adhere to, right? And so I learned to work through that and to start to question my why around a lot of things and to just say that word a lot more, just like word three. Why? You could say it now, right? Just start doing that for yourself. And it just changed the game. It changed the game because I stopped trying to control. And, sometimes I find that start to happen again and I'm stressed. I'm like, man, I was really trying to control everything, right? And then I wonder why I get disappointed because we can't control everything. We can control our attitude and we can control our effort, not all the other things going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I just went to um Canada on accident the other day. Literally.
Accident.
So it was I am a great planner, and then when I plan trips for me and my mom or my family, it's I just don't read the fine print. Like that's just not what I do. That's just I don't do that, you know. So I got us a hotel room over at the Brock Hotel, and I'm like, yeah, it's definitely on the New York side. You know, I've got us, we went to Niagara Falls and I got us the Maiden of the Mist on the New York side. We were all going to go. I'm wearing their Maiden of Mist t-shirt right now. It's just reminding me of this question is why I asked. But anyway, so we're in line to Canada. I'm like, we are not supposed to be going to Canada. I don't have my passport on me. My parents do. My son doesn't have a passport. He's 5. And we get up there and they give them their passports. And I'm like, I've got a picture of mine on my phone and I can give you a picture of his birth certificate. But we have reservations just right there. It's like a 10-minute walk right there. And they're like, okay. So they let us in. And I'm like, this is amazing. But my dad is having a mini stroke driving us through the border because he's like, he's never traveled with me. And every time like I said, this isn't new. My mom is very, very accustomed to me and my non-fine print reading. And my dad is like, what is happening? I can't believe this is happening. This isn't going to happen. And I'm like, you just have to trust the spirit, trust the process, trust the universe. So with that, where does faith come into this stress, and how does that help alleviate that controlness, so to speak?
I can really only speak probably for myself. So I will start with saying I believe faith is an enormously important factor in our lives, right? Whatever that looks like for people, I think having that sense of purpose to a higher power is extremely important for not only for us to stay grounded, but to not feel hopeless, right? And I think that those are, really important things that we want to, be mindful of. I think in my situation, I half gave it up to God, right? I would perhaps pray for things, but still hold on too tightly. And so faith has to be true faith, right? You have to be willing to let go. You have to be willing to say, hey, I'm going to stop controlling this. Not like I'm going to control these few things. I'm going to ask you to take over these few things. Yeah. How does that sound in terms of a plan, right? And so, because often, that surrender is such a huge, again, going back to ego and fear, I feel like we've been talking about that a lot today, but the ability to surrender requires both of those being let loose, right? And so, I think that I consider myself a strong person of faith. And I will say that when I had the point that everything felt like it was crashing down around me, I did still feel that strong connection, but it was not until I really started to evaluate why was I controlling so hard and willing to get an emotional coach to process it, that I was able to just, again, truly let go and learn, where do I need to, control things and where do I not? And, and I feel like that is also a permission that we give ourselves. The same grace we would show other people if we would do it for ourselves half the time, I think that we would be amazed. And so I do think that you can, like anything else, having faith is amazing, but at some point, you can't use that either as an excuse. You have to be willing. I hate to tell you this, Rachel, but at some point, you might have to read the fine print if you want to guarantee that there's no stress on the trip with your dad, right? So there's some things that we could leave it up to faith, or we could learn and then maybe make some micro changes the next time that we know will set the room a little bit easier, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It never fails. I'm like, I will do it. One day I will have a perfect vacation planned that I will plan, and everyone will be so bored.
You're so
Just
funny.
that's how it happened. Oh, all right. I've got a few rapid fire questions I want to ask, and we'll go from there. And all right, here's the one. What's the biggest lie we've been told about stress?
That it defines our success. Yeah, and that we need it to be successful.
Yes. What's one habit people should stop tomorrow?
Stop blocking your calendar so that you can't even go to the bathroom.
Oof. Yes.
Since we're
Yeah.
being rapid, I'm not expanding, but that's my tip.
What's one habit people should start tomorrow?
Make space. If we can start making space in our calendars, even if it's just for a few minutes, be amazed at what the universe is going to put in that space.
But what's one thing your younger self stressed over all the time that makes you laugh now?
Gosh, I feel like there's probably a few. It being late still bothers me, so I can't claim that one. But I think that people felt a certain way about me more than I needed to think that they did, if that makes sense, right? That people were more concerned about things than I really even needed to worry about.
And last one, what's one sentence from De-Stressed you hope people never forget?
Your energy is your greatest currency.
I love this so much. So Jen, where can we reach you? Where can we get your book? What can we do to continue this conversation if we wanted to have that more with you?
Yeah, so I think just jenstanford.com is probably the easiest place. I mean, I'm on all the socials, some better than others. But it's in Amazon, most bookstores now. There's an Audible if you prefer that. It's on the Kindle or the library, almost in every format now. And there's places if people want to reach out to me and ask questions. The book is meant to be simple and an easy read because, again, I really want to just dismantle this theory that we have to be stressed. And I believe that we can be successful and peaceful in the same.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for joining the FitZen Project. This was such a fun conversation to have. I feel like we could talk all day long. Like, you're such a balance in what I've got going on in my life. This has been really cool for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so fun. Thank you.
Before you go, if this conversation resonated with you, I want to invite you to come a little deeper and into this FitZen community. I have an email list where I share more of these thoughts, conversations, and things that I'm working on in real time. And I also have a FitZen book club where we're taking these conversations beyond the podcast and actually getting together to talk about them in depth. So I'm building more ways to connect with you guys and this community because I don't want the FitZen Project to just be something you listen to. I really don't. I want it to be something you're part of. And right now, all of it is completely free. So if you've been listening for a while or you just found me today and your thought was like, yeah, these are my people, just come join me. Come join us. And everything you need is in the show notes. So head on down there. And as always, remember, alignment is the new hustle and you are the most important project. I'll see you next time.